They called him the Scourge of God, a leader so ruthless that his very name made emperors tremble. In less than 20 years, he built an empire that threatened to swallow Rome whole. But who was Attila the Hun, and why, to this day, does his name remain synonymous with terror? In the 5th century after Christ, as Rome was taking its dying breaths, a warrior from the steppes emerged as the ancient world's greatest threat. Attila wasn't merely a conqueror. He was a master of strategy, diplomacy, and terror. His story brims with epic battles, betrayals, and secrets that few truly know. The Roman Empire had faced countless enemies throughout its long history, but none struck fear into their hearts quite like the man who rode at the head of a horde of mounted archers. Imagine the panic that swept through villages and towns at the mere rumor of his approach. The dust clouds on the horizon that signaled impending doom. The distinctive twang of Hun, bows that sent veterans of Roman legions fleeing in terror. What drove this man to build such a fearsome reputation? How did a nomadic tribesman manage to bring the mightiest empire on earth to its knees and extract mountains of gold without even needing to conquer its capital? The answers reveal a brilliant mind behind the barbaric legend, a leader who understood that fear itself was often a more powerful weapon than any sword or arrow. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of the great empires like this video, subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we journey back to a time when the fate of Western civilization hung in the balance, and one man nearly changed the course of history forever. Around the year 400 after Christ, in the mist-covered plains of Pannonia, what we now call Hungary, a child was born who would one day make the world tremble. Attila entered a world where his people, the Huns, were already feared across the known world. These nomadic warriors from the east had been pushing westward for generations, driving other tribes before them like leaves before a storm. Imagine growing up in a society where boys learned to ride almost before they could walk, where children practiced archery daily from horseback, shooting at targets while galloping at full speed. This was Attila's childhood. The Huns weren't just good horsemen, they were practically one with their mounts. Roman observers would later write that Hun warriors seemed to eat, sleep, and even conduct business on horseback, dismounting only when absolutely necessary. What made the Huns truly terrifying was their mastery of the composite bow. Unlike the simple wooden bows used by most European armies, Hun bows were engineering marvels, crafted from layers of wood, horn, and sinew laminated together. These weapons could punch through Roman armor at distances that left legionaries utterly defenseless. A Hun warrior could loose up to 5 or 6 arrows in the time it took a Roman soldier to ready his pilum for a single throw. But the path to power for young Attila wasn't straightforward. The Hunnic Confederation was ruled by his uncle Rugila, who had united many of the scattered Hun tribes under his banner. Attila and his brother Bleda learned the arts of war and politics at their uncle's side, watching as he extracted tribute from weakened Roman territories and built alliances with Germanic tribes. Then came the moment that would change history. In the year 434, Rugila died suddenly during a campaign. The circumstances were suspicious, to say the least. Within days, Attila and Bleda had declared themselves the new rulers of the Hunnic Confederation. Many whispered that the brothers had orchestrated their uncle's death, perhaps poisoning him during a feast. Whether true or not, the brothers proved ruthlessly efficient at consolidating power, eliminating rivals, and forcing tribal chiefs to swear personal loyalty. For 8 years, they ruled together in an uneasy partnership. Bleda was said to be the more traditional Hun leader, focused on raiding, plunder, and maintaining the old ways. Attila, however, had grander visions. He had spent time as a hostage in Roman territories as a youth, learning their languages, studying their weaknesses, understanding their politics. He didn't just want to raid the Romans. He wanted to systematically extort them, to become a power they couldn't ignore. Then, in 445, Bleda died during a hunting expedition. Again, circumstances were suspicious. Some sources suggest Attila himself arranged the accident. Whatever the truth, Attila now stood alone as the undisputed master of the most fearsome military force in Europe. Here's something fascinating many people don't know. Despite his fearsome reputation, Attila never actually besieged Rome itself. He came close in 452, marching deep into Italy with his horde. The Western Empire was in panic. Then something extraordinary happened. Pope Leo I personally rode out to meet Attila at the River Mincio. What transpired at that meeting remains one of history's great mysteries. According to Christian tradition, Saints Peter and Paul appeared in the sky above the Pope, brandishing swords and threatening divine punishment if Attila attacked Rome. A miraculous intervention, but more pragmatic historians suggest other factors were at play. A devastating plague was ravaging Italy that year, and Attila's army was likely suffering from disease and exhaustion after a long campaign. Perhaps the Pope offered a substantial bribe, or maybe Attila received news of Eastern Roman forces threatening his homeland. Whatever the reason, the Scourge of God turned his horde around and spared Rome, adding another layer of mystery to his already legendary life. The boy from the steppes had become the most feared man in Europe, commanding an empire that stretched from the Rhine River to the Ural Mountains. Through strategic brilliance, brutal intimidation, and an almost supernatural reputation for ferocity, Attila had transformed a loose confederation of nomadic tribes into a superpower that could bring emperors to their knees. While many conquerors sought to burn Rome to the ground, Attila found something far more valuable, extorting the once mighty empire for massive amounts of gold. This wasn't just robbery, it was psychological warfare at its finest. By the mid-5th century, Attila had perfected a terrifying business model: pay me or face annihilation. The choice he offered both Rome and Constantinople was brutally simple: tribute or war. The Hunnic horsemen would appear at imperial borders with a message that spread fear throughout the empire: your gold or your lives. In 447 after Christ, Attila delivered perhaps the greatest humiliation to the Eastern Roman Empire. After a devastating military campaign that left the Balkans in ruins, he forced Emperor Theodosius II to sign what historians call one of the most one-sided peace treaties in ancient history. The terms were staggering: 6,000 kilograms of gold paid immediately, plus an annual tribute of 2,100 kilograms more. That's enough gold to make a modern billionaire blush. But the humiliation didn't end with gold. Attila demanded and received vast territories along the Danube River, creating a buffer zone twice the size of modern Hungary. He even forced the Romans to return all Hunnic deserters, who were promptly impaled on stakes as a message to anyone considering betrayal. What made this extortion particularly brilliant was that Attila never intended to conquer these territories permanently. Why bother with the hassle of governing when you could simply drain their wealth through terror? Roman citizens were literally melting down family heirlooms and stripping gold from their temples to meet Attila's demands. The Western Roman Empire fared no better. Emperor Valentinian III scrambled to appease the Hun, emptying imperial treasuries that had taken generations to fill. Some contemporary accounts suggest that Roman women were even donating their jewelry to the state to help pay these crushing tributes. Did you know that at one point the gold tributes to Attila represented nearly 30% of the entire Roman imperial budget? This financial bleeding was slowly killing Rome from within, arguably doing more damage than any battlefield defeat could accomplish. So what do you think? Was Attila actually the first protection racketeer in history? Did he invent the protection money scheme 15 centuries before modern organized crime? If you're enjoying this historical deep dive, hit that like button, share with your history-loving friends, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires. And here's something to think about in the comments. Do you believe Pope Leo I really convinced Attila to spare Rome through divine intervention, or was there something more practical behind his decision? Perhaps the Hun was worried about disease spreading through his army, or maybe he'd already extorted enough gold from the Western Empire. Let us know your theories below. By the year 451 after Christ, Attila had his eyes set on a prize far greater than mere gold, the conquest of Gaul, the jewel of Western Europe. This wasn't just another raid. This was Attila's bid for legendary status, a campaign that would forever change the face of Europe. The pretext for this massive invasion was almost comically thin. Honoria, the sister of Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III, had secretly sent Attila her ring, supposedly asking for his help against her brother, who had forced her into an unwanted marriage. Attila, ever the opportunist, interpreted this as a marriage proposal and demanded half the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. When Rome refused, the Hun had all the excuse he needed to launch the largest invasion Western Europe had seen since Hannibal crossed the Alps. What followed was a nightmare of epic proportions. Attila's forces, numbering somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 warriors, poured across the Rhine River like a storm of arrows and hooves. Cities fell one after another. Metz, Reims, Mainz, Strasbourg, all put to the sword. Contemporary accounts describe rivers running red with blood and entire towns reduced to smoking ruins. But in the face of this apocalypse, something remarkable happened. Bitter enemies became desperate allies. The Roman general Flavius Aetius, whom some call the last true Roman, managed the impossible. He convinced Theodoric I, king of the Visigoths, to join forces with Rome against the Hunnic threat. These were the same Visigoths who had sacked Rome just 40 years earlier. Franks, Burgundians, Alans and Saxons also rallied to this unlikely alliance. It was truly the last stand of the old world against the new. The two massive armies finally met on the Catalonian plains near modern-day Chalon in France. The battle that ensued was unlike anything Europe had ever witnessed. Over 100,000 men, clashing in what many historians consider one of the most decisive battles in world history. The fighting was so intense that a small stream running through the battlefield reportedly turned into a rushing river of blood, carrying bodies along its crimson current. As night fell and the battle seemed to be turning against him, Attila reportedly did something extraordinary. According to the Gothic historian Jordanes, the Hun gathered the saddles of his cavalry into an enormous pyre at his command center. If defeat came, he planned to throw himself into the flames rather than be captured by his enemies. Can you imagine that scene? The most feared man in Europe, surrounded by a mountain of saddles, ready to become a living sacrifice rather than face the humiliation of defeat. This is the stuff of legend. The battle ended in something rare for Attila: failure. Though not decisively defeated, his forces were badly mauled, and for the first time, the myth of Hunnic invincibility was shattered. Attila was forced to retreat back across the Rhine, his dreams of conquering Gaul in tatters. What many don't realize is just how crucial this battle was. Had Attila succeeded in conquering Gaul, he would have controlled an empire stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Western civilization as we know it might have taken a dramatically different path. Some historians have called the Battle of the Catalonian Fields the real saving of Western civilization, more important even than the famous battles of Marathon or Tours. And here's a fascinating detail. Theodoric I, the Visigothic king who joined forces with Rome, was killed during the battle. Legend says he was thrown from his horse and trampled to death by his own cavalry. In the confusion of battle, his body wasn't found until the next day. His son, Thorismund, took command of the Visigothic forces and helped secure the victory. Talk about a battlefield promotion. Despite this setback, Attila would regroup and invade Italy the very next year. But the man who had seemed unstoppable had finally shown a weakness. The seed of his eventual downfall had been planted on the blood-soaked fields of Gaul, where for one brief moment the dying Roman world and its former enemies stood together against the storm from the east. In March of 453 after Christ, the most feared man in Europe celebrated his wedding night. The mighty Attila, at the height of his power, had taken a new bride, a beautiful Germanic princess named Ildiko. Little did he know that this marriage would be his last act on earth. The wedding feast was spectacular, even by Hunnic standards. The great wooden halls echoed with drunken songs and boasts of conquest. Attila, never one for moderation, drank deeply and feasted heavily into the night. As the celebrations wound down, he retired to his chamber with his young bride. By morning, he would be dead. What happened in those final hours remains one of history's greatest mysteries. According to contemporary accounts, servants grew worried when their master failed to emerge the next day. When they finally broke down the door, they found a scene that would puzzle historians for centuries. Attila lay dead on his bed, with no signs of violence. His young bride Ildiko sat veiled in a corner, weeping. The official cause of death was recorded as a nosebleed. The story goes that Attila, in his drunken state, lay on his back and choked on his own blood. But many whispered darker theories. Could Ildiko have been an assassin sent by Rome or Constantinople? The timing was certainly suspicious. Some suggested poison slipped into his wine cup during the festivities. Others pointed to the Byzantine Emperor Marcian, who claimed he had a dream that very night where he saw Attila's bow broken. Here's something fascinating. The Germanic peoples had a legend about a woman named Gudrun who avenged her murdered family by killing Attila on their wedding night. Could Ildiko have been carrying out a similar revenge? We'll never know for certain, but the parallels are striking. The death scene itself was like something from a Gothic tale. The servants found their master's face black and swollen, with dried blood trailing from his nose and mouth. Yet his new bride appeared untouched, though reportedly in a state of shock. When questioned, she could only say that her lord had died in his sleep. The Huns, following their customs, cut their hair and slashed their faces with knives in mourning. They held a great funeral feast called the Strava, where warriors rode in circles around Attila's body, singing songs of his deeds. Then, in the dead of night, they buried him in a triple coffin: gold, silver, and iron. The slaves who dug the grave were killed to keep its location secret. To this day, no one knows where Attila's body lies. The most powerful man in Europe, who had made emperors tremble and nearly brought Rome to its knees, was undone not by armies or assassins' blades, but possibly by the combination of too much wine and a nosebleed, or perhaps by a beautiful bride with a deadly secret. It was an oddly anticlimactic end for a man who had lived such an epic life. What do you think really happened that night? Was it truly just a tragic accident, or did someone finally manage to eliminate the most dangerous man in Europe? The truth lies buried with Attila himself, in an unmarked grave somewhere beneath the Hungarian plains, waiting to be discovered. After his death, Attila's empire crumbled as his sons fought over his legacy. The mighty Hunnic confederation that had terrorized Europe for decades fell apart in less than 15 years. But the legend of Attila lived on, a cautionary tale about how even the mightiest can fall in the most unexpected ways. In the end, Attila's story teaches us something profound about power and legacy. Here was a man who rose from the steppes to build an empire that stretched across 2 continents, who brought the mightiest civilization of his time to its knees, and who died at the height of his power in circumstances that remain mysterious to this day. Think about this. 15 centuries after his death, we still use Attila's name to describe fierce and unstoppable leaders. His military innovations changed warfare forever. The composite bow his warriors wielded would remain the most powerful weapon on Earth for nearly 1,000 years. His diplomatic strategies, playing the Eastern and Western Roman empires against each other, became a blueprint for future rulers. But perhaps Attila's greatest achievement wasn't the gold he extorted or the cities he conquered. It was his ability to unite dozens of warring tribes under a single banner, transforming a loose collection of nomadic raiders into an empire that nearly changed the course of Western civilization. Had things gone differently at the Battle of the Catalonian Fields, we might all be speaking a very different language today. When his empire crumbled after his death, it created a power vacuum that reshaped Europe. The Germanic tribes that had served under him would go on to carve up the Western Roman Empire, giving birth to the kingdoms that would eventually become modern European nations. In a way, Attila's legacy lives on in the very borders of today's Europe. Some historians argue that Attila's invasions actually helped preserve Roman culture by forcing former enemies to unite against him. The alliances formed to resist his armies laid the groundwork for medieval European civilization. It's one of history's great ironies that the man who nearly destroyed Rome also helped ensure its cultural survival. Whether you see him as a brilliant strategist or a brutal destroyer, there's no denying that Attila changed the world. His life reminds us that history often turns on the actions of extraordinary individuals who emerge from unexpected places to reshape the destiny of nations. If you've enjoyed this journey into one of history's most fascinating figures, make sure to like this video and share it with your friends who love exploring the past. Subscribe to Legacy of Empires and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll uncover more forgotten empires and the remarkable leaders who built them. From Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, from the Persian Empire to the Vikings, there are so many amazing stories waiting to be told. Until next time, remember that history isn't just about dates and facts. It's about understanding how individual actions can change the course of civilization itself. This is Legacy of Empires, where the past comes alive, one empire at a time.